Hey, what is going on, Hustle Buddies? Welcome, everybody. We're going to give you guys just a little bit to sort of trickle into this live show. If you are watching the replay, big shout out to you guys. I know it's not always easy, especially for those of us who have kids and jobs and families and things like that. It's not always easy to come in on just a random weeknight. But I appreciate you guys who are taking the time out of your schedule to come here. So tonight, we are bringing in one of my favorite guests. We've had her on a couple times. So Lauren, she is our resident tax, Amazon, bookkeeping, all like the ugly, boring stuff, all of that, those parts of your business. She handles all of that professionally, and she's been doing that for quite a long time. She specifically does this for Amazon sellers. Like that's sort of her niche target market. She was an Amazon seller for a while in the past as well. But then she just started like, well, why am I going to continue selling? Let me just help sellers instead of trying to run two jobs at once. So yeah, she just focuses on Amazon sellers. She knows her stuff. If you guys have questions, drop them down in the comment section below. It's also easier for us if you put like #question or something like that so that we can sort of see it. But we've got this streaming on a couple different places. So if I miss your question, I apologize. I'm trying to jump around a little bit between our Facebook group and YouTube and all of that. But yeah, without any further ado, let's bring Lauren in here. Hey, Lauren, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Awesome. Yeah, we are. It's weird to say like I'm excited to talk about taxes with you.
I'm excited to talk about it because tax season is kind of over.
Uh-huh.
It was a heavy year this year. So every year our client base of Amazon sellers getting their taxes done just continues to grow. I think we saw like, I want to say the number of tax returns we did like tripled from the first year we started working with Amazon sellers. So
Wow.
It's been busy. It's been really busy, but it's slowing down. Every now and then I get a couple people, well, probably at least one a day that still needs help with their taxes. But yeah, it was a good tax season. I have to fix this. It's going to drive me nuts. Other people will be looking at it in the background like, can she fix that picture frame?
I love it. Yeah, so we thought we'd bring you in and have you sort of we want to be able to sort of answer the questions of our audience. So if you guys are watching this, if you guys have tax or bookkeeping related questions, that's why we're here. But also, like, I just sort of want to get like the sort of drinking from the fire hose type of knowledge from Lauren here. Like, if you could just sort of lay out, I don't rapid fire, not necessarily. I mean, we can kind of dive into things, but like lay out all of like the most common things where it's like, okay, if we can just answer this is like 90% of people's questions.
Yeah, so I have quite a few of those. So one of the number one questions that I get each year is, I did not get a 1099K from Amazon or eBay or something like that. People kind of panic. And so the first thing I want to point out is that not everyone will get the 1099K. And if you do not get it, it does not mean you don't have to file. So sometimes I get people, maybe they're a bigger seller on Amazon and they're a smaller seller on eBay. And they're like, well, I didn't get one from eBay, so I don't have to include that information. No. We have to include it all. So any side business you have, any side hustle at all, really, that if you make $400 or more, you are required to report it. So that's a really big one that I get. But just know that if you're an Amazon seller and you don't get a 1099K, that is okay. The date range payment report will give us all the information we need, all the sales, refunds, seller fees, postage, all that good stuff. So there is an alternative. If you don't get your 1099K, there's no need to panic. So that's a real big one that I get every year. And then The other one is I have a lot of sellers that do not realize if you, so sorry, just totally lost my train of thought. If you are filing your taxes, you have to include your Schedule C. So if you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, that has to be filed with your personal tax return. There is no file the personal return first and do the business later. In addition, they're not filed separate to begin with. If you have a multi-member LLC or you have a business taxed as an S Corp, those tax returns get filed first, and then you file your personal tax return. So that's a big one. I get a lot of people that filed their personal already and thought that their business was completely separate. So then not only do you have to pay a second time for your personal return to be amended, but now you may owe a tax balance if you had a refund before, or maybe in some cases you end up getting more refund if you took a loss, but you end up paying twice for the tax return. So that's another huge thing that I come across every year. So business return gets filed first or with your personal return. They are never completely separate. Let's see, just really quick. I want to make sure if we have any questions before I keep going.
I think we're good. All right. So
okay.
1099, regardless of if you get it, you still got to file.
Right.
And then your business and your personal happen simultaneously.
Right. And then another one that I just want to throw out, which it feels so silly to say. Some people are probably going to think that this is just ridiculous. But if you have a side business, you should always assume you are going to owe money at the end of the year. Not all sellers do, but you should assume you're going to owe. I get a lot of sellers that I do taxes for, and maybe they were really small last year. They had some losses on the business, and then this year maybe they did 150,000 or something, and they're shocked to find out that now they owe. They're not getting a refund anymore. So you should just assume that you will owe at the end of the year, and if you don't, that's a great surprise. But I just want to throw it out there. That is really common that people are confused. They have a balance. Let's see. There is a question. So
JR on YouTube says here, I'll show that right there. Can my business rent my detached garage for me, or would that just be a wash because he has to report the income?
So if your business is renting the garage from you truly, then yes, you'd have to report it as income. The thing with garages and basements, when you're using them for business, is that they are not included in the square footage of your home. So typically, when the home square footage is calculated, any unlivable space is not part of the square footage that would be on like an assessment or like your closing statements, anything like that. So sometimes what some people will do is they'll say, okay, the garage is, let's say it's an extra 100 square feet. You add that to the overall square footage of the home. So you could rent it to yourself, but then you'd have to also factor what percentage of the garage is my utilities. Did you have to make special modifications, some things like that. So it would be on kind of like a case-by-case basis if you have utilities to the detached garage, things of that nature. So it's a little more intricate than just a quick answer.
As so many things are, it's one of those like, it depends.
It is. Okay. I did see another question pop up. Just let me know if you want to do that one or if you want me to keep going with this list.
Let's do some like rapid fire sort of like your frequently asked things, and then we'll sort of pop over to that.
So another one that I get is, it's typically after the fact, after the taxes have been done. I will have people contact me and say, I got a notice because it says I didn't file my sales tax return. Why didn't you file that? Because sales tax is completely separate from income tax. So Most Amazon sellers are filing like a 0 sales tax return because Amazon's collecting and remitting sales tax on your behalf. But even if you don't owe sales tax, you still have to file the return with your state. If you have a resale permit, a seller's like certificate, every state calls it something different. But if you have an account open so that you can buy things tax-free, you have to file the report even if it is 0. Otherwise, they'll assess you and say, we think you owe us this much money. And that causes a lot of panic for sellers. So that is separate from your income tax return. Do not assume no one's filing it. Not me, your other, tax preparer. It's not part of income tax. TurboTax doesn't do it. And the same with annual reports. So if your business is registered with your state, they usually want an annual report from you. It tells them who are the owners of the company, what is your address. Sometimes it will ask what was your gross revenue in the prior year. Those are not always included with an income tax return. Some states, like the state of Texas, will allow us to attach like an annual report or their like state franchise tax return. They don't actually have state tax, but we can attach the report to the tax return. Not all states do that. So if you get a notice, or if you even go on like your Secretary of State website and search your business, it should be able to tell you when your next annual report is due. So that's just a little common misconception that it's included, but that's really easy. It takes you just a couple minutes to confirm the information, and sometimes they don't even charge you to file it. So those are two other really common ones. And then something I've been seeing pop up a lot, I've gotten a lot of questions and I've seen a couple people bring it up in the group, is some states will refund you sales tax that you paid on your inventory. So what I want to point out about this is if you are going to claim the refund from the state, but you deduct it on your taxes, you say, I already paid this sales tax, and then you get a refund from your state, you have to then claim that as income. You cannot get the refund and deduct it on your taxes. So I just want to make sure people know that, because this question seems to be becoming like really prevalent. And so just don't deduct it if you're going to get the refund. It's just going to give you headache later.
And from a seller side of things as well, a common mistake that I sort of see people make is they're either not tracking sales tax at all, like they're not recording it anywhere,
No.
Or when they're listing things like, let's say we're using Inventory Lab, which many of us are, they're adding their sales tax on like an individual item level to their cost of goods, which really makes your record keeping really messy.
It's so difficult. My favorite recommendation, if you're using Inventory Lab, and I know this because I've done this, so I would take all the receipts from whatever batch we were entering. So I put in all my items into my batch. That's all good to go. At the very end, I just take the receipts, add up the sales tax really quick, and make one entry for other expenses for sales tax paid. It makes it a lot easier to track that way. I do have tons and tons of sellers that did not track sales tax. I have tons of sellers that do not use Inventory Lab. That's another note that I have, is that once you've paid for your seller account, you've got Keepa. If there's something you're going to pay for next, unless it's like a Hustle Buddies course, the next most important thing is Inventory Lab. Don't pay for QuickBooks. Don't pay for outside services. No tactical anything. No extra stuff till you get Inventory Lab. I'm just a firm believer that it is the best option. I've seen other software. I've seen people use A2X, Seller Cloud, Seller Board, you name it. There's like a ton. That cost of goods sold tracking on those is really rough. So Inventory Lab is so important. Sales tax is a huge issue for a lot of sellers. And tracking your inventory value and your cost of goods sold, they're such a big deal. So sorry, totally a little distracted on that, but I love Inventory Lab and I want everyone to use it when they can afford to.
Yeah, it's very frequently like top 2 of our list, like Inventory Lab and Keepa. Like you want to have good record keeping. and you want to know
Yes.
if something is selling.
And it's a lot more affordable, in my opinion. We just went to the White Label Expo. That was an uh-oh for anyone that's been there before. You know, it's not really for e-commerce sellers. It was a whoops on my part. But there is software companies there that do work with people doing FBA or FBM, and I've looked at their pricing now because they want me to push it to my clients. And I've looked at their pricing. I'm like, no way, that is not affordable. You charge by transaction. It's so expensive. So Inventory Lab is really, really great. But that's my favorite one. So let me see. Really quick.
Yeah, if you guys have other questions, drop them into the chat for us. We'll get to those sort of at the end. Lauren's just kind of going through her like most commonly asked things, and then we'll try to head over to chat. But keep them coming, guys, so we've got a nice big pipeline of questions.
Okay. Another thing that I get asked every year is when do I have to start paying taxes or filing taxes quarterly? And so there's a little bit of a misconception or misunderstanding about quarterly taxes, estimated taxes. Those are not really tax returns. So you're not really filing quarterly. Those are prepayments towards the amount that you think you are going to owe at the end of the year. So the IRS says, we expect you to pay 90% of your tax balance throughout the year, whether that's from your paychecks, by paying prepayments throughout the year. So it's just a lot of people get really confused about when do I file quarterly or how do I pay taxes quarterly. It's not truly a tax return. You don't need me to do it. You go right on the IRS website and you submit a prepayment towards your future tax balance. So that's just one that I get a lot. And then I do want to point out that I do have a lot of sellers that have come to me over the last few years, and maybe they've used TurboTax. Maybe they've used a CPA or a tax preparer that does not know anything about e-commerce. This year, for example, I had a client last year, so I did their 2021 taxes. They decided, well, we're going to try going back to our old tax preparer. So she sends me her return and she says, can you please review this return and tell me if it's right? I looked at the return. The amount used was off the 1099K. So that doesn't factor any customer refunds or returns. There was a lump sum entry for seller's fees, but it showed the business had a $30,000 profit. There was missing expenses, all kinds of things like supplies. I want to say even like home office deduction, auto mileage, the basic things that a seller would have. It showed a $30,000 profit. In the end, this person ended up owing, I want to say around $6,000 just to the IRS. Once I pointed out that there was errors in there and things that were missing, I redid the return and they ended up getting a $5,000 refund. So, and this is like really common, or I have people that file their returns or they attempt to file on TurboTax and then they're not quite sure and they'll have me do it instead. And in the end, they end up either, getting more back than they expected or owing less than they expected. So it's really nice for you guys to have someone that, I always say, we speak your language. So I understand Seller Central. I can tell you how to pull the reports. I actually have clients who I have access to their Seller Central to specifically pull reports. We know how to navigate it. We know how to use Inventory Lab. We understand things that not all tax preparers or accountants, CPAs understand. So the benefit to you is that I can provide guidance that you may not get otherwise. They may not even know what to ask for. They don't know how to find it. So this is the benefit to you guys as sellers using myself or someone else that specializes in it, just because we have that extra knowledge that not everyone else does. And we know the right questions to ask to make sure the basics at the very least are not missing. And so I've had this happen pretty much year over year where people send them to me and say, can you review these? I've had to amend many returns. So I just wanted to point that out. Another one that I want to point out, which doesn't really matter as much anymore, because in last year, and I think the year prior, you were allowed to get a $300 extra deduction on your tax return if you made donations. It doesn't work like that anymore unless you're itemizing on your tax return. But if you donate physical goods to like a Goodwill, Salvation Army, something of that nature, and they hand you a slip that just says the date and like their signature on it, there's no value, that doesn't equal a tax deduction. So if you don't have a physical value, then there's nothing to write off on the return. So TurboTax does have like a tool you can use all year long where you can enter like what you donated. It'll say like men's pants, boys' pants, baby clothes, like very specific. And it will help you track like what the fair value of the donation was. So I recommend using that tool if you are donating goods to those types of stores, because they won't write a value and that doesn't help you. And then, okay, so
real fast, I've got a question about that. As far as like fair value goes for donated items, is it like, are you sort of estimating like a rough MSRP for the item? Like men's pants, am I putting like $40 because that's usually what they sell for, or am I putting like $6 because that's what I paid?
It's fair market value or what you paid for it, so whichever is less. So
gotcha.
Technically, so if you have some inventory that you bought and you can't sell it, it's part of your like dead pile or something like that, you know what you purchased it for. We know what your donation value is because you paid for it, so that's okay. You can use your purchase price.
Okay.
But if you're going through, like, and a lot of sellers even do this, if you're going through your closets and you're donating like bags and bags of clothes from your own personal stuff, or like whatever it actually is, you have to know what the value is, or there's no, like that blank receipt doesn't tell us anything. We can't put an arbitrary number. So, and I've had this come up for people that do like a heavy amount of donations of like clothing and goods, where it actually made a pretty significant impact on their tax return because they were itemizing, but they had to go into that tool and provide me a breakdown of everything, because I'm like, I can't just put this amount without the detail. I literally can't file it like that. It will not allow me to. So I needed to know what the fair market value was. And then real quick, I'm actually almost done with these, so I'll just finish these off and we'll just answer questions only. Another question I get a lot is basically like, how do I reduce taxes, or what's the next strategy? When should I switch to S Corp is the most common thing. So there is no just straight S Corp or S Corporation. So usually you're an LLC taxed as an S corporation or making an election to be taxed like that. I do not recommend making that switch until you have a profit of about $50,000. The reason why is because anyone that owns 2% or more of that business has to go on payroll. So when you factor in payroll, you need to make sure that you actually have profit left over after paying payroll to really reap the rewards of that S election. So I always give like an easy kind of example. This is not exact because there's other calculations, but if you have 100,000 in profit as an LLC, let's say, you are going to pay 15.3% in Social Security and Medicare on that $100,000. So that's $15,000 right off the bat. But if you had 100,000 in profit and you were an S Corp or elected S classification, let's say you paid yourself 50,000 through payroll, you will pay Social Security and Medicare on that money. That's great. We all want to retire one day. The remaining 50,000 in the business now is not subject to that 15.3%. So it's roughly a $7,600 savings. So you need to make at least 50,000 to feel the relief of that election. And then I just have two more quick ones here. So a lot of people ask, when is it the right time to get a bookkeeper or pay for your services or things like that? Really, you can do it whenever you want. Some people say, I want to do this right off the bat. I want to do it correctly. We usually will say, you should be averaging at least 10,000 a month or more. And I say that because I know that you need to put every last dollar back into your inventory in order to see that growth. So I'm not going to push anyone to sign up for services. I will turn people away or just kind of flat out say, do this for now and then come back to me when you're at this point, because otherwise, I don't want to be part of the reason why you're struggling in the beginning. And then, what are the benefits of using a bookkeeping service, which really kind of comes back to those taxes and missing expenses, owing more than you probably should. I see a lot of people will send me their expenses for their tax returns, and there is quite a few things missing. So I'll have to go back in an email and say, I didn't see this, this, or this. And the common things are sales tax paid. A lot of people forget that they may be paying for business insurance. So maybe you have like Ashland Haddon, or you're paying some other insurance company for your seller insurance. They'll forget that. Credit card interest is a huge one that people forget. I think they go through their credit card statement, they write off all the things they purchased, but then they forget the interest that they were charged. And then the other one is bank fees. So if you have a business bank account and you're maybe paying a $15 a month fee to them, people will forget bank fees, any overdraft fees, ATM fees, things like that. So the point of having a bookkeeper is that you are not missing any of those transactions, because we're literally combing through every expense and deposit that you have to figure out what it was for. What did you spend that money on? And then we're also entering all of your sales, seller's fees, postage, shipping income. I know someone had a question, what is shipping credits? Promotional rebates. We enter all of that. And then we're also entering in your cost of goods sold if you are keeping track with Inventory Lab or some fancy spreadsheets that some people have. So it's really important. I've had quite a few sellers come to me and then they owe a ton on taxes. And I say, just pay for this catch-up work. I'll redo the whole year and let's see the difference. And we've had some significant changes, like
it's basically
$15,000 savings. So it's a huge deal. But okay, those are all of my like really most common things. It probably seemed like a ton, but.
And I like to tell people, like, I harp on this all the time in like my coaching calls and things like that with private students, but like you really, as a business owner, you need to focus on your highest income producing activities, your IPAs. And like doing your taxes and doing your bookkeeping is such like a waste of your time and expertise. Like, I am not a tax professional. I am not a professional bookkeeper, but I'm really good at finding good deals and really good at sourcing and all this stuff. So like, instead of spending 10 hours of my time trying to like manage all this stuff, let me just pay someone else to do it, and I'll go sourcing, and I will absolutely come out ahead because it will be done better than I could do it. I'll save more money on my taxes, like when they're actually done. And I will actively be making more money than I'm paying somebody else by sourcing instead of doing
And you'd be really surprised, of all of our bookkeeping clients, there's maybe a handful that we have to communicate with on like a regular basis. But our goal, so we've streamlined everything we possibly can, from like our onboardings and contracts. Everything is completely streamlined and automated. So we've got this software. We have workflows. It has it's called a client vault. We store usernames and passwords. We know where everything is, how to get the bank statements, the seller's reports, all that. And so what happens is every month, for the people we have logins for, we just enter all the sales, the transactions, cost of goods sold, and we send the financial reports. There are some clients that I probably have not spoken to, none of us probably have spoken to since they signed on. And that's just because it's so automated, it goes out. But how awesome is that? if you don't have to do any of it. You don't have to log in
Exactly.
and pull your data. You don't have to enter something on a spreadsheet and try and keep track of it yourself. Like, it is just done now. It's automated. The ones that we struggle a little bit with is if we have to send verification codes from the bank and they're not available, like we don't have our own logins, or if they didn't want to provide logins, now they have to send us copies of statements, which is maybe, like I said, a handful, and that kind of falls back on you. So we're free over here to help, but so it's just, we have tried so hard to automate as much as we can to make it super, super simple for sellers. So it's, it's a great tool if it's something that's in your budget, and you'd be surprised like what the annual total comes out to. Like, I've been looking a lot at our competitors. There's a few different ones out there, and their pricing on a few of them, some of them start a little lower than us by about like $45, is cheaper than us, is probably like the cheapest I've seen. But when you read their fine print, they make you pay for QuickBooks. Your cost for QuickBooks, it could come out to, $80 a month. My cost for QuickBooks is a massive discount. So I just include that in my price, but they don't. And the reason why is because they get a revenue share off of it if they don't do it. So
people just get, like, you're using QuickBooks and people just can sort of piggyback off of you with that. Am I understanding that?
So as an accountant, I get an accountant discount. Now I could do the same thing. I could have just like a referral link, and I'll get paid. Honestly, I'll get paid 30% of what you pay for a year if I don't give you my discount. But when I'm doing your bookkeeping, I just include that in the price. So I just pass through my price to you, versus the $80 a month. I think it cost me like $38.50. So it's like a massive discount for me. So instead of me trying to make a couple extra dollars off of my clients, I just include it in the cost. So really, when you compare competitor pricing, they're not actually cheaper because they make you pay for things on the side. And then some of like the up and coming competitors, I've been checking out their pricing starts higher than ours. So, and it kind of jumps quickly. So like I was saying, some of these people charge you based on like the volume of transactions, how many sales and like refunds basically that you have in a month. We don't charge like that. We do a flat rate fee, and maybe at earliest, like 6 months in, like if you gave us some really misleading information, we might have to adjust the price. But we do it based on complexity. So it's how many bank accounts, credit cards, and loans do you have that we have to physically enter and reconcile. And it doesn't matter to me if you sell $5,000 a month or, you do $2 million a month. That doesn't matter. We're not treating anyone unfairly. So anyhow, the point was that it is a lot more affordable than you'd actually think if you compare pricing with other services. So, okay. I'm so sorry. Just so excited to talk about taxes and
So, all right. So I've got a two-part question from me, and then we'll jump into chat. If you guys have tax questions or bookkeeping questions, drop them into chat. We've got about 20-ish minutes where you're talking to a tax professional. So ask your tax questions, and we're here to help. But I've got like a two-part question for you at first. So what are like the most common, and someone even asked this, but like what are the most common errors or omissions that you see? So that's like part one. And part two is, what was like the craziest omission, or like the biggest, like, wow, we fixed this and now it's like this whole other thing. You may have already shared that story.
So
yeah, most common,
do you mean,
and craziest.
Do you mean like omissions as in like forgotten expenses?
Sure, like things that people just didn't put on their tax return, just the most common things that people are like not either claiming or writing off or whatever it is.
So I think a big one is credit card interest. So especially as you scale your business, you may make quite a bit of purchases on credit cards. So I've seen some sellers like forget to report like $8,000 in credit card interest, which can be massive. Like that could be the difference between you showing a profit versus taking a loss. So credit card interest is a really big one. I think too that like there's a possibility a lot of people don't track their supply purchases very well. Sometimes I get really low numbers for supplies. I know that poly bags and boxes and labels are not like that cheap when you're at this, volume of
Uh-huh.
sales. I think the biggest thing that I come across, like I said, is people not tracking cost of goods sold or not using inventory lab or some similar service. That can be a huge deal because I think people will miss. Sometimes what people will have to do because they have no choice is they'll have to try and tally up all their purchases for the year for inventory. You have to write it all off because they have no clue. And I think even in some cases that those numbers may not be accurate. Like you're missing some stuff. And I know when you first start out, you might be swiping all of your personal cards, bank accounts, you name it, and you may miss some of those transactions. So I think those are the credit card interest is definitely a huge one once your sales volume goes up, because I know you're all charging ridiculous amounts to your credit card. A lot of sellers, like I provide during tax season, I give like a huge email full of instructions, and still people will not fill out this little spreadsheet I have for auto mileage or home office deduction. They'll send me
Mm.
everything else, but that's missing. Those
And
are
guys,
huge deductions.
auto mileage, yeah, for one, it's huge. And two, it's super easy. Like there's so many apps out there that can help you with this. Like we've used Mile IQ for ages and it's easy. Like as soon
I
as you
love
are
Mile IQ.
right, as soon as you're driving, your app detects that you're going more than like 20 miles an hour or whatever, and it'll send you a
Yeah.
little alert like, hey, are you driving for business or for just your normal life? And if you just
Yeah,
mark it for business, it'll just start tracking.
I know. What I love about Mile IQ too is that you don't have to mark personal or business all year long, and it will let you go back and see on the map where you started and
Uh-huh.
ended. So then you can say, oh, this was Starbucks or this was Target or whatever it
Uh-huh.
was. And so I like that it's not something you have to do like on a daily basis to keep track. Um, Auto mileage is a big one. The rate is so high right now. If you did not do your taxes already for 2022, the rate switched halfway through the year. So it was higher from July 1st to December 31st. So if you didn't do your taxes already, that's a great thing to know about trying to figure your mileage for the first half of the year versus the second. But then home office deduction is a huge one too. And some people will even say like, well, I don't own a home, I rented. Well, that's even better for you because you actually get a way bigger write-off if you paid like some astronomical amount of rent. But those are huge deductions that people like just don't fill out or they forget about. Another one that a lot of people forget about because I feel like they think it doesn't pertain like exactly to their business is you bought a new printer, you bought a new computer, you got an iPad, you had to buy a Rolo printer. People forget that like you bought a new desk, that might be $1,000 desk, who knows, your office chair. People forget those expenses on their tax return when they're first starting out. I know some people may have things around the house they use, but if you're buying those big new purchases to be able to run this business more efficiently, then don't forget those when you're doing your taxes. That's another really big one. Okay, what was the second part of that question?
Okay, so first was the most common, and the second, like, what was the craziest, biggest? I don't know, however you want to define that. Either like most shocking, like I can't believe they didn't do that, or they did do that, or like something that you were able to find and change, and it completely like maybe someone was having you review an old tax return. I don't know. I'm just looking for a
The
crazy story.
biggest one actually had nothing to do with Amazon sells. They are an Amazon seller, but they also owned rental properties. They were writing off their rental properties under the rental property business, but then also writing it off on their tax return. So that was a fun
Ooh.
conversation.
Uh-huh.
But the biggest one with sellers was truly just not so sometimes we've got sellers, right? They've got full-time jobs, maybe multiple full-time jobs. I've had people that are they are travel nurses, or they're just so busy. I have some people out here doing Amazon sales that I'm like, wait a minute, you make so much money in your regular job. Why are you doing this? But some people are so busy. that they don't have the time to devote to keeping track of things. So it was actually last year for the 2021 tax season, an Amazon seller sent me all the deductions they thought. I kind of mentioned this earlier. They sent me all the deductions they thought. I did the tax return. I think they owed about $24,000, something like that. And we redid all the bookkeeping for that whole year. And in the end, they owed $9,000. So they did have a pretty profitable Amazon business, but that's a massive difference, like $15,000 in taxes that they would have paid just because they didn't have the time, or maybe they didn't have the know-how, or they weren't thinking about all the things that they could write off. So that's $15,000. That's huge. Like, and for everyone that I do taxes for, I just tell them right away, you can go on the IRS website, put a payment plan, right? But it's pretty actually uncommon that I see sellers owe like a huge amount if you're doing the proper tracking. It is such an expensive business. The average profits between, I'd say, close to 18% is what I see, but I always just say somewhere between 10 and 20% is the profit you can expect to make once you're you've got a bigger volume of sales. But so it's just so important to track expenses.
Yeah.
There's no amount of me babbling could make it hit home for people, but it's important.
It was wild to us because we were teachers in the past, and then we became Amazon sellers, and then we became pretty large Amazon sellers. And it was wild to us that, up until maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, our tax bills were so much less as Amazon sellers than it was as public school teachers working for the state. It was pretty wild. It's you don't owe a bunch of money.
Yeah, I get quite a bit of teachers too, people that teach and they do this on the side. It's really interesting to me to see the different industries that sellers are involved in aside from Amazon. It's a lot of fun. We have one client, he's probably in this group. He's a book proofreader. And I'm like, that is so cool. And I read a lot. How do I proofread books and get paid for it? So I think that is really awesome. I've got some people that are in corrections actually here in the state of California. I've got tons of people with rental properties. So apparently that is an excellent stream.
Yeah, we've got some rental properties.
Yeah, you guys do. I wish I did. I follow some people on TikTok that do Section 8 rentals, and I'm like, I want to do this, but we have enough. I have to tell myself no. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's fun. It's fun to see what other people are doing.
Awesome. All right, let's dive into a couple of these questions while we still have some time. So, someone on Facebook was asking for a ballpark amount for your charges. So basically what Lauren was saying earlier is you want to be selling about 10,000 a month or more for any sort of bookkeeping type of service to sort of be worth it. After that point, it varies quite a bit.
Our prices start at $345 a month. So it's just flat out. I don't hide it. It's right on my website. They start at $345 a month. And that includes the cost of the QuickBooks subscription. You do get access to QuickBooks, and should you cancel services, full ownership transfers to you. So they'll just say, you pay the subscription if you want to continue this. Otherwise, you have a year to pull your data. So that for that base price, it includes up to 3 bank accounts, credit cards, loans that have to be reconciled. And then, so we enter all the transactions, we categorize everything, we ask for your help with anything that we cannot figure out, and then we reconcile all of the accounts and provide financials. The goal is by the 15th of the month, assuming that we have all the information necessary to complete it by then. So $345 a month. It's no secret, right on the website. You guys can always go there. I've got it set up where you could tell it how many accounts you have. It'll give you the price, and you can sign up through the website if that's what you want to do.
Awesome. All right. Chris over from YouTube says, He has a franchise tax, business tax, and personal tax. Does he have to do all three if he's a single member LLC?
So,
I believe he's in the state of Texas. I think I saw further.
Okay. So, and then I think you had a second question that was posted too, that TurboTax said you had to file separate. So what it should be, if you're a single member, well, it says single member LLC/corp. So I'm assuming you're just a single member LLC. That would be filed as a Schedule C on your personal tax return. The only thing TurboTax may not be able to do is file that state franchise tax report. That's like the annual report for the state of Texas. So maybe they don't file that, and that's why they said you have to do it separate. So in my case, the tax software I use, it does file Texas franchise tax as long as I have your web file numbers. So if I were to do it, I would file all three of those together. But I don't know exactly how TurboTax works.
And I mean, my advice here, like, even if I'm not a lawyer, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you hire to do your taxes to me, but please don't do your taxes yourself. That's like the worst of the worst options. I have, out of all of like the friends and family member, everyone else I've ever seen, and I've used TurboTax myself in the past, but holy smokes, like when you compare like what a person who does this for a living and can catch things that you might not catch and see things you might not see, fix mistakes you might not know that you're making, like you always come out ahead by hiring someone else. Right. Even if it's, I'm not even talking about like ongoing bookkeeping, even if it's just like a single time, like, okay, end of year, I just need to hire one person to do my taxes, hire someone to do your taxes, preferably someone who knows Amazon.
And I think that even on TurboTax, like once you really start looking at like the charges, I had done the math the first year we started doing this just so I could show that my prices were comparable to them. By the time they're done adding fees for your business return, and maybe they charge you like $30 to e-file and another $30 to get their little guidance on the side, I don't know, you might be paying equal to or more than using a professional anyway. So you might as well let like a real person do it that you can have a conversation with, or you guys can ask each other questions back and forth, versus like a AI guide on TurboTax website. So
all right, let's see. Someone was saying, all right, so you recommend an inventory lab. Do you also recommend having QuickBooks? Like, do you need both of those two things?
So,
or can you get by with using one or the other?
You can get by using just Inventory Lab. The difference is that Inventory Lab, all your expenses that do not run through Seller Central, they have to be entered manually. So I know that you can set some things on like recurring as a recurring expense. So maybe you pay $49 a month for Inventory Lab. For some reason, it doesn't auto track your subscription fee. You can put that as a recurring expense. But like everything else you buy, all your supplies, your random charges, when you have UPS pickup from your house, those don't automatically go into Inventory Lab. So when you can afford to, you can get QuickBooks and you can connect your bank accounts and credit cards, and it will download everything from the bank and it will start to learn. So I think I've talked about this about every time. Once you tell it this is Inventory Lab, it's software, next time it sees an Inventory Lab charge, it's going to assume it's software and ask you to approve it, or you can set a rule and it will auto add Inventory Lab as software in the future. The problem with QuickBooks is that it is so user-friendly that anyone can use it and anyone can really mess a lot of things up. So there are times where I have sellers come to me, they say, I already have QuickBooks, I'll just add you as a user, you can take a look. And then I look in there and I'm like, I don't want to see anymore. Fix this, this, and this. So it's just so user-friendly. It makes it really, really easy to make mistakes. You just start clicking around in there and entering numbers, and before you know it, you've got like a really bad set of financials. So I don't necessarily recommend that you get it and try to like become a professional bookkeeper overnight. You do the bare minimum with it and you keep it basic. So don't do a category in QuickBooks for meals and entertainment, and then under that you have sub accounts for fast food, coffee, steakhouse. Don't do sub accounts like that. Keep it basic. Office supplies, meals and entertainment, travel expenses, bank fees. Very, very basic. Do not get too granular. It gets very confusing, and then it needs cleanup at the end of the year. I love QuickBooks. If you can afford to pay for QuickBooks, then by all means use it to make it easier to track your expenses, but you need that after you've got an inventory lab. I know you're not saying you don't have inventory lab, but for everyone else, do not get QuickBooks if you don't have inventory lab.
Awesome. And someone, maybe you could kind of expound on this a little bit more. I think someone missed it a little bit earlier, but like sales tax reimbursement, when you're paying sales tax on items, you mentioned that might be able to get reimbursed. Could you explain that just briefly?
So some states, and I'm pretty positive it's not all, because I don't think that our state does it. Some states will refund you sales tax that you paid on inventory. If you have like a resale certificate or a seller's permit. Some states will do that. But as I mentioned, if you deducted the sales tax you paid, whether as part of your cost of goods sold, like you included it in your purchase price when you built your batch and inventory lab, or you deducted it on your tax return, if you get a refund from your state, now you have to claim it as income. Myself personally, filing an extra sales tax return to get the refund when I can just write it off as an expense it's not worth your time. And also, I have a lot of people that are really confused about filing a zero sales tax return. So I'm not sure how comfortable y'all are going to be trying to request a refund from the state. So if it was my opinion, I would just take the expense, write it off on my taxes. Don't go through the refund process. You don't want any room for errors where you've deducted it and gotten a refund, and you don't want that. That's my personal opinion. Some states do it. I am not a sales tax master. There's too many rules for all the different states. I do have a company that I am partnering with that I met that is all they do. They specialize in it, similar to TaxJar and Avalara, but they're like real people that you can talk to. So I'm working on that with them. And then I will have a great resource. They do it specifically for e-commerce sellers, focus on sales tax. So if you don't want to do it yourself, we'll have someone for you soon.
Love it. And actually, that is a good segue. Now, I'll preface this with sales tax and use tax. I wish there was a separate word for this, because
Right.
when I say I'm filing my taxes, that has nothing to do with sales tax or usage tax. So this is not the type of stuff that Lauren does. If you have any insights to this, feel free to share. I'll share some of my limited knowledge of this. But Millennial Money Mom was asking how tax exempt status works if you source in multiple states. My understanding is that you get it for your home state where you have a nexus. And then if you want to get it for other states, you're allowed to. It's just a lot of work. So it would only make sense if you're purchasing a significant amount of inventory from stores that accept sales tax exempt things. Because let's say you're traveling to a bunch of Kohl's in the area. All right, well, there's no sense in getting a bunch of sales tax things for different states if you're just going to Kohl's, because Kohl's doesn't care about your sales tax exemption.
So something that I think may factor into this question too is whether you're using your sales tax permit that you have to order online versus being physically in the other state. So if you're ordering online, the state of delivery is your state where they're shipping it to. So it's based on your sales tax status. Now, if you are physically crossing state lines and sourcing in another state, I do have sellers that have had to register for their nearby states that they want to shop in. So they have to have a separate sales tax permit, unless a state may have a reciprocal agreement. But again, sales tax is so difficult because every single state has a different law. Literally every single state has different rules. What is nexus? What qualifies? What doesn't?
And back when I was starting on Amazon, Amazon didn't
I
permit
would say
anything.
if you're physically sourcing in multiple states,
Whoops. Are we still here? Check. I can hear you and I can see you. I'm not sure if you can hear us. Well, let's ask chat. Chat, can you hear me? Can you hear Lauren? I think we've lost Lauren. Let's bring her back. Let's see if that works. There we go.
So sorry. I have no idea what happened.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Okay, so I was just saying, if you're physically going to other states, they may not accept the sales tax permit from your state. So just something to keep in mind when you're going across state lines.
Yep, love it. Let's see. Do you have to scan receipts into QuickBooks, or can you skip that step and just file the receipts? File receipts for purchases.
So you can absolutely skip that step and just, stick them in an envelope and save them in a shoebox just in case you need them. But QuickBooks Online has a really cool feature. You can get either the QuickBooks app on your phone and take a picture of the receipt from the app, and it will save it. And then it will try to match it to banking transactions. If you spent $50 at Walmart and it sees the $50 receipt come through in the banking screen, it will tie that receipt to the purchase. Or there's another feature. You create a unique email address in the QuickBooks receipt window, and then you can email receipts to QuickBooks Online. It's completely not necessary. You do not have to do that, but you do want to, of course, keep your receipts somewhere in case you had an IP claim or if you were audited in the future.
Awesome. All right, this next question, it was actually something I was going to ask if no one else had asked it. Can you speak about prep centers that are not in tax-free states? So I was curious about this because I've never used a prep center that was taxed. All of the prep centers I've ever used have been in tax-free states, so I didn't have to worry about this. But could this potentially be a time where it would make sense to file like a tax exemption? Let's say you're using Texas or something, and you have a prep center in Texas. Is that a time where you think it might make sense to get like a tax exemption certificate for the state of Texas if you're doing online arbitrage, but then delivering it to the state of Texas?
So maybe, no, I guess I I don't know, maybe I don't understand the question exactly. So the prep center is not in a tax-free state. So when you deliver it, you're getting charged tax for having it delivered to that address.
Like I live in Florida. I'm ordering from Kohl's.com. My prep center is in Texas. I don't know if all of these things are actually true, but just for the sake of argument. And let's say Texas charges a 5% tax on all the clothing that I just purchased from Kohl's. Because when I order it, like I'm sitting in Florida, but when I'm ordering it to the location of Texas. And so I believe I'm paying Texas sales taxes via Kohl's, because they're not taking my tax exempt thing.
So then, yeah, you may have to register in that state. The only thing is that you could write off that sales tax, like we talked about, because you pretty much always pay sales tax at Kohl's, right? And well, yeah. Not you, but I do, because I live in California. We get taxed on everything. So you can write off that sales tax. Now, the question would come in about Nexus in this case, but your product is only at that prep center for such a momentary amount of time that I don't know that would even qualify you for Nexus in that state. So you may be better off just writing off the sales tax, and OA sites typically aren't going to accept your sales tax permit anyway, unless you're ordering from like a wholesaler. So maybe I didn't understand that question correctly, but I don't think
maybe I'm misunderstanding it too. Reva, if we got that completely wrong, let us know. And
TaxJar, Avalara, great services.
I used Avalara for ages. Up until, because back in the old days, back in my day, Amazon didn't remit sales taxes for like any state. Now, officially, as of this year, it's all 50 states. Every single one. Yes. Amazon is remitting their sales tax. Missouri was the last one to jump on board. And 2021 was finally when Florida jumped on board. But up until 2021, I was using Avalara to do all my sales tax stuff because they would just do it automatically. All right, next question. If I don't use Inventory Lab, what's the recommended bookkeeping method? If Lauren has something different to share, I'll let her share.
You go.
But I'm going to rephrase this question. If I don't have ice cream, but I really want ice cream, what's the best method of getting ice cream? Eating ice cream is the best method. So if you don't use Inventory Lab, what's the best method? Go get Inventory Lab. That's the best method. Honestly, I would even take the argument where, like, if you don't have the, I forget what Inventory Lab costs now, $50, $60, whatever it is.
So
Let's say it's $60. If you don't have the $60, it's more like the amount of, because you could do this in Excel. You could like track every single thing in Excel and try to keep your own spreadsheets. But the amount of time that you're going to spend in Excel per month for your regular purchases, it's probably going to exceed 2 hours. I don't think that's out of the ballpark. I think it would be more efficient to like go to some garage sales or go to Goodwill or something and flip a couple things on eBay and make that $60 that way, rather than spending your time trying to like do bookkeeping the hard way. Like it's a fairly, in the grand scheme of business expenses, Inventory Lab is fairly cheap and affordable. It's pretty low on the totem pole, and it's usually like the first or second tool that people get for a reason. So you can do things using an Excel sheet if you want. But honestly, I would recommend figuring out a way how to make $60 a month, drive for Uber for a couple hours, like do something where you can generate that money, and then don't bother doing that yourself. That's my opinion.
Hey, that 2 hours in like Walmart grocery aisles could really produce a lot more than the $60
right. You
a
find
month,
one
so.
replay, boom. you get Inventory Lab for yourself, for your sister, for your mom.
Right.
Awesome. Chris, he asks, can I write off prep center fees as well? They're in a tax-free state, but it's like if they charge, say, $1.50 to package something up, can he write that off?
Absolutely. If you are paying a prep center, you should be writing that off. Anything that you are paying for to run your business, you should be including it as a write-off. If it's like out of like it's not reasonable by the time myself or another tax preparer gets it, we'll let you know if you can't write it off. But you should assume everything you pay for your business is deductible. So if you pay prep centers, if you pay contractors, I will say if you pay a single person more than $600 in a year, you have to 1099 them. But if you pay contractors $500 to help you prep your shipments, that's a deduction. Supplies, boxes, tape, labels, pretty much everything that you spend money on for this company, for this business, is a write-off. There's very few things that I have told people no to.
So this whole thing reminds me of that one episode of, I probably can't say it because I'm on YouTube, but Craft Creek. That's not a write-off. That's not a write-off, David.
I think I've seen this TikTok quite a few times. I'm a TikTok junkie at night. Like when I can't shut my brain off, I just scroll through TikTok and watch like mindless videos. Chris did have another question, which was, can you write off leads list? Sure, why not? You're paying to learn where to get product from. Write off your leads list. If you're paying dues and subscriptions, if you're paying for Hustle Buddies courses, if you were paying for any of these things, you include them as a write-off. And I'll even see people, I'll be like, well, last year you wrote off, $500 on Hustle Buddies courses. Did you have courses last year? And they'll be like, oh, you know what? I did pay for this one or for that one. So don't forget, it's so important. I don't know the right way to tell you to do it, what fits into your schedule, but if it's weekly updating your spreadsheet, if it's monthly, if you really love spreadsheets like me, then you might want to update it daily. I don't know. That's how I track my trades and my contract options and things like that. But keep track. Every little thing you pay for, assume that it is a write-off. I promise we will tell you if you can't do it. TurboTax won't. Don't use TurboTax. But we will tell you if it is not allowed. And that is very, very few things that I've disallowed people.
Awesome. Love it. All right. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you've got a family to get back to, as do I, but we appreciate.
They went to Target without me.
What?
So I
Did
could
they
have
bring their tax exemption card. So yeah, we'll let you get back to a house by yourself, which is probably a rare occurrence, as many of us parents know.
Right.
So yeah, we appreciate you coming out here to Hustle Buddies. If you guys have further questions, you can continue dropping them, even if you're just watching the replay of this. Drop them in the comments section of the Facebook group. If you're watching the YouTube video, I don't get notified from those comments after the fact. So hop over to our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/hustlebuddies. Find this video. You'll find it in the media section. And if you have further questions that we weren't able to get to tonight, drop them in there, and I'm sure we'll be able to come back periodically and try to sift through some stuff. Make sure if you are looking for a person to do your taxes next year, check out Lauren's stuff. Super affordable, fantastic. She catches a lot of stuff other people don't. If you want bookkeeping, like ongoing bookkeeping stuff, again, check her out. She does this for a living, and she does it for Amazon sellers. Like you don't have to reinvent the wheel or teach anyone like, oh, have you thought about that? Like, no, she already knows everything. You don't have to do anything. Just, yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks for coming out, everybody.
Thank you.